Hello and welcome to Coach, the Professional Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Teresa Brooks, bringing you conversations from coaches around the globe that want to create impact and that care about the values and the ethics and integrity they uphold in their businesses. So today I have with me Karen Williams, the book mentor. Karen is obviously going to talk to us about how important it is to write a book and all the juicy bits in between. But also it's important to know that Karen herself is a published author. She's written 9 books and she's a TEDx speaker. And she's also been in business for coming up to, if not touching on, 17 years. So she's definitely got a good amount of knowledge in there that you'll want to absorb today. So welcome, Karen.
Thanks, Teresa. It's lovely to be here. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so it's great to be with you today.
I know we finally got the pitch, didn't we? Finally got the spot for the podcast. So Karen is also a member of Coach Connect, which is the coach networking community, and it's a networking that I set up on the back of Coach, really, with the same values, because as coaches we often work with each other, but we often get locked out of other networkings as well if we can't maintain the seat or there isn't a space for us. So Karen's part of that group as well. So if you want to come along to that, I'll tell you how to do that at the end of the podcast. So for now, Karen, let's begin with you. I mean, 17 years is a long time. Have you always been writing books and helping other people to write their book? How did it all begin?
It all began for me as I had a career in hospitality originally. I worked in hotels, supervisory management positions for many years, but I always had an interest in training and developing other people. So not surprisingly, I moved into an HR role, and that was back in the early sort of 2000s, early noughties. And I had a situation at work one day when my boss said something to me, and it kind of triggered something in me to actually do something different. So I got myself a coach. I'd known about coaching for quite a while, and I worked through the stuff that was going on in my head. And one of the things that came out of working with that coach is that I trained as a coach myself. So that's obviously going back to 2006, a long time ago now. But the books didn't happen until a few years later. And but it was the thing that really changed my business. So I trained as a coach initially, did my NLP practitioner, master practitioner qualifications back in the 2000s. Yeah,
which of course is, very close to my heart. Absolutely love NLP. It's my chosen modality to using coaching, and I don't know how anyone could really do much without it, if I'm honest, once you really understand what it's all about, human communication. And of course, written communication in a book doesn't just kind of rock up and, oh, there's the book. There's a whole process, isn't there? You talk about unpacking how you're feeling, unpacking what's going on. I would imagine that the process is quite similar for a book. People think, oh, I don't know, but, what would I write? I mean, you must hear that one a lot. So let's have a look at that. What would I write?
Well, I'll take you back to my first experience of writing my first book, which was summer of 2009. And I did it as a result of my NLP Master Practitioner qualification, because I was modelling the mindset behind a successful coaching business. So I had the opportunity to meet and model some amazing coaches within the industry in the UK and also the US. But when I did 11 interviews in total. I had so much information. It can be so hard to distill all of that information into a book. So what you write about has to be related to your business, and that wasn't related to my business. So literally with that first book, I made every mistake under the sun. I went through every probably challenge that all of my clients go through now to actually get that book written. So it took me 18 months. I had no idea how to structure the book. My inner critic got in the way more times than I care to admit. I went round and round in circles. I had no idea how to publish it. But it's one of those things I learned on the journey. And that's one of the reasons I do. For the last 8 years, I've been supporting business owners with their books. Obviously, it wasn't something I did back then, really, because I've learned from my own experience. In terms of working out what subject to write about, it has to be the things that people are asking you about every day. As a coach, I know that as a pure coach, I am a mentor. I call myself the book mentor. As a coach, you need to be, or pretty much most people are purists, but actually we've all come to where we are today because of our experience, our background, and that normally is the place where one would start in terms of writing a book, and also looking at where they might want to take their business. So I certainly didn't do it back then, but it's one of the things I've learned on my journey.
Yeah, and of course, those learned experiences and the things you've gone through are the things that we want to know because we don't want to make the same mistakes again. I mean, who's got 18 months to write a book, right?
Absolutely.
But it's interesting how you talk about, you see how coaching comes into this process as well, because when someone's got an inner critic babbling about in their head about how they shouldn't write a book and that's rubbish and you better redo that, blah, of course it's going to really, really slow you down. So what I'm hearing there is clarity on the purpose and the intention of what the book is about. And you're right, a lot of people have got a lot of knowledge, like we know a lot of stuff, so like, my goodness, certainly I've thought that about writing a book. What how would I start to distill, is the word you used, all of that into something which has got, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 chapters, really useful for other people. And so that in itself can be overwhelming. So how do you approach that with your clients, Karen?
Well, there are 7 shifts that you need to trigger in your readers for them to potentially engage you, recommend you, and rave about you. And I talk about that in my latest book, The 7 Shifts. But there are 3 key components that one needs to think about when they're writing a book. First of all, it's the impactful idea. So when you've got an idea that everything hangs off, it's easy. So if you are a sales coach, for example, you probably wouldn't be writing about relationship coaching. So it's thinking about, okay, so what is the idea? And then it's looking about, how am I going to hook in my audience? What is the biggest problem I'm solving with this book? So one of the mistakes I see people make, Teresa, is they write a book that's too broad. And actually, the more niche you are, and I was speaking to a client this morning who's got an incredibly niche book, but for him, he needs one client to actually recoup the investment. So actually, when you look at it in that way, it's about looking at your audience, who they are, what is the hook, what's the point of difference that you can give them, and also what problem you're solving. So once you've got your impactful idea, it's looking at what are the significant stories that you can bring into your book. So that might be your stories, it might be your client stories, might be anecdotal stories. So it's about, how are you going to show the proof that what you teach, what you coach, actually works. And then we go into the memorable methodology, which takes people on a journey from the thing they're struggling with through to the transformation they're looking for. So if you pick up any good book, Atomic Habits, Miracle Morning, Eat That Frog, you name it, the books that are really successful, and you dissect them, you'll see there's a process that they follow, and they follow. I dissected a lot of books when I created the 7 shifts, and there is a process they all follow, and it is really that idea, the stories, and the methodology, because that's what makes a really good book. And then, of course, you need to tell people how you can help them further once they've read it, of course.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because the word process of writing a book or anything is really, really important. You've got to have a process and a framework. And some people may view writing a book as really creative, and kind of letting it all flow. And I think that's probably how you could get lost in all of your chapters, because there is actually no framework, no process. And it's interesting you say that, because, sort of mentioned sales, and I do a lot of sales communication work, and there is a process to selling. There's a sales process to learn, which once you learn it, you go, oh, that feels better. Oh my goodness. And no wonder I couldn't just do it when I was just chatting away and saying whatever I felt like, and I didn't know where it was going. So, it's really interesting to bring that in. And what do you find the biggest problems are that people come up against when they want to write a book, aside from the ones you've mentioned? What do you sort of, within themselves? You mentioned your problem was your sort of inner critic getting in your way. So what problems do you find, and how do you help them with those?
So, yeah, of course, confidence in the critic comes up a lot, and also overwhelm comes up, and they can be interlinked, because overwhelm can cause the inner critic to flare up, and vice versa as well. Overwhelm tends to happen when people don't have that process. So I've got 10 steps I take people through when they work with me, because and there's various sub steps as well, because there is a process you go through. And actually, if you start with step 5, which is writing, without doing the first 4 steps, you're going to come a cropper, because you're going to write loads of words that maybe you need to get rid of later or wasted, and you can quickly go overwhelmed. And when you're overwhelmed, that's when nothing happens. That's when the book does take 18 months or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, because you can't see the wood for the trees. You can't get out of that mess that you're in. It's always about taking a step back and regrouping. So there's a process of planning, being really clear about why you're writing it, who you're writing it for, what are you writing, and how you're going to do it. And of course, putting the time in the diary. Nothing happens without energy, without effort, does it? It takes that effort to do it, to put the time in the diary and make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's I had a client who was writing a book for quite a while, and it was getting to that sort of point. And so in the end, I wasn't part of that book process with her. She was working with another coach for that, but I was the one that then came in and said, right, let's get this sorted. And so it had to be like fierce accountability, really. And it happened, and it's publishing on the 21st. And she was like, oh my God, I never would have got there if you hadn't given me that. So that accountability, I'm sure, comes into it as well, doesn't it? Is that something you offer as part of your programs?
It is, and normally it's accountability in terms of, okay, what are you going to do? So there's a couple of things I like to do is I like to work back from the ideal launch date to the current date and put the milestones in place. So instead of writing a whole book, you're writing a chapter, or you're doing a chunk at a time, and it feels less overwhelming when you're doing that. But absolutely accountability with all of my clients, whether they're on my fast track program or whether they're working one-to-one with me, there's the accountability, because unless you know what the mini milestones are, you're not going to achieve that bigger goal. So it's about breaking it down and having, maybe 2 or 3 things to do in terms of what needs to happen, when it needs to happen. And for someone like myself, being there in case something goes wrong, or they're struggling, or they need just a different perspective. That's where I tend to come in and support people through the process. So I do review clients' work, give suggestions. Ultimately, their book is their voice. But actually, if I can suggest ways of, maybe moving some paragraphs around to make it a little bit more attention grabbing, that's the sort of thing I do with people.
Yeah. And so you talked about obviously making this almost like, maybe way back in the day, we'd have a business card, but now we have a book. It's like, this is my book. And I suppose, before coming into this industry or anything that's sort of like entrepreneurial in this way, a lot of people might think, oh, well, who am I to write a book? Like, can't write a book because that's just for real published people. So let's talk about the difference between published and self-published and how you approach that, because I think that's something, I used to be in publishing, so I understand it, but I think it just sounds like a right pickle, doesn't it, for people that wouldn't understand, well, how do I actually get this book printed? Like, how does that actually happen, and what are the options?
Yeah, I think for most of my clients, because they are writing a book that is totally aligned to their business, and it is a business card at the end of the day, they go down the self-publishing route, because there are advantages of doing that. You retain your intellectual property, you can publish what you want to publish, which has its pros and cons as well. So certainly I recommend having a team of people who can do the editing, proofreading, design, because when I say self-publishing, I'm not talking about vanity publishing, I'm talking about professional publishing, because there's, with anything, you can print a book badly and you can print a book well. So it's about making sure that it's totally aligned to your brand. So it does you and your reputation some good, of course, is really important. So certainly there's advantages to self-publishing. One of my clients over the summer, she got a publishing deal. So some books lend themselves to having a publishing deal, but for many people who are writing a book that might lead into a course, might lead into a program, the last thing you want is for your message to be diluted because an editor's got a different agenda. So I think that's really important to consider when it comes to a book, is that making sure it is aligned to, starting with the end in mind is the first thing I tell people to do. So what do you want that book to do? And actually making sure that the book actually does what you want it to do, because the book itself will not make you much money. But actually, if you can serve more people with a course off the back of the book, or you promote one-to-one services, or you get more speaking engagements or corporate gigs, that's when the magic happens. The things that your book can do for you.
It's like a giant brochure, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's a real insight to you. And often it's important to, I don't know about the books that you like reading, but when I can feel the person, through the pages of the book, not just a how-to, but even in a how-to, you can still feel that vibe. Maybe they're funny, or maybe they're very serious or very academic, and some books you pick up and think, gosh, I can't get through this. It's a bit heavy. Someone else goes, oh, I love that book. So I think it's really important, isn't it, to bring out your personality, not just think, oh, I'm trying to, convey facts and a how-to here. And so how is all that done? Like, because a lot of people might say, well, I don't know how to write. I don't know. I know my stuff. I know what I do. but I've never written more than a birthday card, really. I don't think I'm a writer. So what would you say about that?
Well, I'm going to share a tip that I shared with a client recently, and that is to look at other books and look at how, and dissect, as I just mentioned earlier, how they're written. And you will probably notice with the really successful books is that every chapter has the same rhythm as the next chapter. So open chapter 2, it might start with a story, then it might go into a definition, there might be top tips at the end. So you kind of get into that rhythm, and so this client I was working with this morning, he's got 7 things that he's talking about, and actually if each of those 7 things follow the same structure, it's going to be so much easier to write. So we can allow our creativity to flow when we're in that situation, but there's a structure behind it that kind of contains the writing. So you don't go all over the place, and it doesn't take you 3 years to write one chapter, because it's quite contained, and then you can actually write what you want to get across in that. It comes down to the planning, and it also comes down to the execution in terms of doing that.
So you've got quite a focus now on business books, but I mean, I'm curious, what was your first book? What was your labour of love that came after that 18 months?
So my first book was The Secrets of Successful Coaches. So it was a book modelling coaches. So absolutely perfect for this podcast, and obviously Coach Connect as well. So yes,
that's great. Yeah.
I modelled successful coaches. I wanted to know what's the difference that makes a difference between a coach who is successful and one who isn't, in terms of not just the qualification, but in terms of the number of clients they've got, the presence, the authority they have, and that's what the book was all about. It took people through 10 key areas that they needed to consider. So things like niching, things like marketing. Obviously, this was published in 2011, so very different landscape to the landscape of today. But so much as it is important. I remember one guy said to me, focus on 3 things, 3 marketing activities at a time, and don't spread yourself too thinly. It's a mantra that I still use today. I interviewed Michael Neal, and he said to me, if you've got 8 ways of getting stuck and I've got 9 ways of getting you unstuck, I win. And again, that's why I've trained as a coach, NLP, clean language, and God knows what else I've learned over the years.
Yeah, simplicity, isn't it? Because all of that is like common sense. And when people say that to us, we go, yeah, of course, yeah. We know that, don't we, consciously? But it's all this other stuff that's going on that stops us. And of course, the overwhelm lands very much in the area it can do of writing a book. So I think it's important just keeping it simple. We create so much, don't we, around all the edges. And all of those that advice, you say the book was, did you say 2011?
Yeah, 2011. Yeah.
But really, okay, so we might have a different language and a different landscape, but I'm pretty sure that not many of those so-called secrets have changed much.
No, I'm sure they haven't.
Not really.
I'm sure they haven't.
They're core, aren't they? They're core. And so
I still get a trickle of royalties from time to time, not a huge amount. As you can imagine, I don't focus on that book. So it's only people who find it, via Amazon and that type of place.
Yeah. And what do you clearly love what you do, and so we talked quite a lot about the sort of the how and the structure. Let's talk a little bit more about you, Karen, and why do you love doing this? What is it about seeing this happen and come to fruition for other people that you really are passionate about?
So I trained as a coach because I wanted to change the world. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a difference to more people. And obviously when you're a coach working one-to-one, you can only make a difference to one person at a time. Obviously through being a book mentor, I can help people to make a difference, to more people. We're in a challenging world at the moment. I know before you started this interview, before we were having a pre-chat, we were talking about the difficulties in the world, and things aren't changing anytime soon. But actually, if you can use your experience, your knowledge, your expertise to change other people's lives and to maybe create some aha moments or new habits or different ways of doing things, that is why I do what I do, to help other people to do that. So that's really kind of my transition into the book mentoring space 8 years ago, was because people saw my success. I was on book number 3 at the time, and I kind of modelled how I did myself. How did I write those 3 books? What was the process I followed? And it was the passion of being able to make that difference that drove me to do it, and still drives me today. But it's not just about writing any old book. It's about writing a book that is really firmly linked to your business and enables you to leverage it. That's so important. It's not about just putting something on Amazon and saying, hey, I'm a published author, but it's actually making a difference with that book through publicizing it, through selling it, through that leverage that you get when you do it well.
Through, I guess, being brave enough to go through the whole process of writing the book and then actually tell people about the book.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, oh, there's this book that I wrote 20 years ago on the shelf. What? Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes that confidence, people, I don't want to really talk about my book. I don't really want to know. Did you write a book? Yeah, but don't say anything. So it's like, it's really about having the confidence to use that, because we have a lot of skills, and sometimes we might even have a book, and sometimes you don't even know that people have written a book, do you? You know, they surprise you. And so it's about really building that confidence. And I can imagine that process does really help with that. But then it's being able to share that knowledge with the world. Of course, that's up to them once people have published their book. And people like to do that for all kinds of reasons. But personally, I haven't written a book yet. And I know we've talked about it a few times. And I've always wanted to kind of like feel my book. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things I could write that would be very useful, I'm sure. But it's like, what's it going to mean to me? And, you know, will I want to talk about it in a few years as well? Will I still be just as passionate? Or maybe that become like, oh, that was my first book and now I've written 4. But I do think it's time to really explore that and get, you know, just really leave something that people can access quite easily as well, isn't it? So if we buy a book, what, you know, we're spending anything between, I don't know, £4 and £20 or dollars on a book, which is, you know, amazing, really, in terms of accessing people's minds and secrets and knowledge. And so it's actually a really good way to help people, not just to make them aware of you, but to really help them as well. You know, when people maybe can't invest in high level coaching and they can't have a one-to-one coach, but they can read your book and they're like, God, I got so much from that. I mean, have you ever got a lot from a book where you feel like you've been coached or you've been through a process? I mean, I know I have. And
absolutely, all the time. You always learn something, you know, with every book, however well or badly it's been written, you still get a nugget from it, don't you? You still learn something from it. You still pick up something that you go, oh, okay, I hadn't thought about that. And even things you know already, sometimes you just need that reminder of maybe things that you've you've stopped doing, or actually I should do more of that, or I will do more of that, because you learn something that just sparks. Maybe you heard it before and it wasn't the right time. You've heard it again and go, actually, I need to do it now. It's
like a gift to the world, isn't it? Really, it's lovely. It feels nice when you think about it like that. Let's talk about covers for a minute, because like, having been in publishing, covers were just everything. Cover of my magazines, like what would be on choosing the cover of my monthly magazine that I used to publish was the biggest problem I had, because I was sourcing imagery, sourcing stock, and it had to be the right composition, all of that. So I really understand that. And I've seen book covers that I've thought to myself, I thought, oh my God, who did that? Like, not being rude, but seriously, I think that and what the cover is so important. So, you know, let's talk about covers for a minute. Should it be your face? Should it be just some bold colours? Should it be in block? What about that?
I don't do the covers, they're outsourced to somebody else, but certainly from a cover point of view, there are 3 things you look for in terms of, you know, for a book to grab your attention. The cover's got to be good. It needs to grab your attention. It needs to be on brand as well. You know, certainly that's something to think about. If it's your autobiography, absolutely. I worked with a celebrity chef who published his book over the summer. His face is on the cover. You know, it has to be when you're in that situation. But if your book is about a process, you know, it might be there might be a diagram related to the process. It might just be words. I think it's just about, it has to stand out. It can't blend into the crowd. That's the whole thing about a cover. But also the title's got to be good. What's written on the back cover has to be good as well. If you think about, you know, we make such a first impression within a few seconds. So actually what a book says to you from the moment you see it, before you think about going onto Amazon, looking at a thumbnail of a book cover, it's got to grab your attention straight away. It's not like, you know, used to be we'd go in a bookshop, and most of the time these days we get recommended a book, we put it into our basket. At some stage we might check out, or we might go to bookshop.org or wherever we prefer to go. So it's got to grab your attention.
I think it's interesting when we think about how we might choose a book. So I recently chose a book on holiday, and there's so many books, like you're so overwhelmed when you go in. And I'll have this little system. First of all, it's the cover. It's what it looks like. It's the fonts. It's the whole layout of it. Whether I think that's. Then if I pick it up, it's how it feels as well.
Yeah.
And then it's that little catchy bit on the front that will make you go, turn over the back, and then if that sounds good, I then go in and I read like maybe the first page
absolutely
or two, just to see if I can like feel the vibe of the writer. And if the print's too small, I'm like, I can't see that. Now I've got glasses. I'm like, that's going to be a strain. So like that's an age thing, but you kind of look for all these different things which you might not think about by yourself, if you didn't have support to do it, or you didn't have any background in that, which most people don't. But all of those things matter, because I've seen some books that are just so poorly laid out, even that have spelling mistakes. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? And just covers that look like they've just been done on Fiverr. No offense, Fiverr, I love you, great service, but do you know what I mean? That's not really, you do need it being designed properly. So I think the visuals, the content, how it's written, it all matters, doesn't it? And I think these are all the things that you are passionate about helping, authors to go through, because they're unaware, and so that overwhelm would be real. I can't imagine trying to do a book on your own. It'd just be insane.
No, there's so many great creatives out there who, I certainly believe in using expert in something. Why waste my time trying to learn how to typeset, for example, or how to do illustrations, when there are so many brilliant people out there who can do it. So it's about knowing the right people. Certainly with me, I said I don't do the publishing side. I've got a great team I can outsource, illustrators, editors, designers, all sorts of people. And that's the important thing, because this book at the end of the day has to represent your brand, so it has to sell you and your business.
Yes.
That's it, really.
It's true. And let's bring up, I want to bring up one of my sticking points and just see what you think of it, if that's okay. Best-selling author on Amazon for like 10 minutes. Let's talk about that, because I have to say that I do find that to be a little bit uncomfortable, and I think most people can see through that. But it's like, it's such the calling card, isn't it? But we know that if you use the categories, the timing, and you get absolutely everybody to support you and help you, and that's all part of the launch, then poof, you can be there, grab your spot for X period of time. But it's not really authentic, is it? Like, I think of a best-selling author as an Oprah Winfrey, or someone that has actually sold a shed load of books and it's still churning out, on the shelves of Smiths and all kinds of things. So tell me about that, because that's just been my perception of me just being a big fat meanie. So
okay, so putting it from an author's perspective, when you launch a book, there should be a load of marketing that comes up literally from the moment they start writing it. So it shouldn't be a surprise when an author launches a book. They should already build their community, have people waiting for it, and ideally have some pre-orders. Now, I think it's really important when it comes to a launch is to celebrate the launch, whether you used to, obviously, pre-pandemic, we used to have book launch parties. I remember, I think it's 2019, I travelled up and down the country to book launches all over the place. But I think the most important thing is you market. Now, the thing about focusing on getting to Amazon #1 from an author's point of view is you make sure as many people as possible hear about it on that particular day. So there's a process. I teach the process. It's the process that works, but the Amazon bestseller is kind of almost like the cherry on top of the cake. The most important thing is as many people as possible hear about your book on a given day. So that's what I focus on. So I get what you're saying. But I think, some are more bestsellers than others, aren't they? But also I think what really grates me is when people sell it for free, then they're an Amazon bestseller. Well, I think there's slight difference when a monetary exchange has happened, but actually when you, when you have it for free and you're a bestseller, that's not really a bestseller, is it? Let's face it.
No, it's like the best giveaway, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's not to knock any of that, because it is important, but then suddenly everyone's bio will change to best-selling author, and I'm like, personally, I'm like, well, probably not really in terms of integrity and congruence, but you did do your best on that day, and that did that was a great launch, etc., etc. And it's
Yeah.
not to take it away, but I think it's important to highlight the differences there between, what's really going on and how you can sort of make a book work for you with integrity. So yeah, you've made that really clear. So thank you. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that if anyone's listening, they're quite keen to write a book now if they haven't. I'm probably thinking about, let's just talk to wrap up. What are the things that stop people? So you've kind of gone through some of the hows, the whys, the coaching element of it, and the teams, and how you get it actually seen out there in the world and what it can do for you. But what are the things that really stop people? Like maybe you've spoken to people who they're like, I really want to do this. What are their big buts? What really gets in their way, where you've seen people just not be able to, get over that? And then how could you help them if they were feeling the same?
So generally people say, I don't know how to get started. Obviously, I help people to get started and finished. I haven't got time. And actually, if you could dedicate half a day a week to your book, you could get it written in 6 months. Again, I've done the maths around it, because all you need to write is 2,500 words a week, which is a couple of blog posts to actually get your book out there. But again, you need to have a good structure to make the most of that time. I don't know what to write about. So that's when I remind people about the expertise, the story, the experiences they've had already, and how to package it up. So they're probably the three main reasons. You stop time, don't know how to get started, don't know what to write about. And then obviously, you've got the, I don't think I know enough, etc., that can come out as well.
Yeah. So how much does it all cost to get a book out there? Because I think sometimes people's perceptions of it are like, my God, it's going to cost so much for me to actually do this. What's the point? Or I can't afford it at this time. Or, wow, that's so much less than I thought. So, what are the numbers around producing a book?
It depends. Certainly in terms of working with me, I offer everything from a $14.99 book to a $497 online program, through to £8,000 all singing or dancing coaching package that takes people through the whole process on a one-to-one basis. So I think there are different levels in terms of working with me. From a publishing point of view, you can use Fiverr, but you can also spend £4,000 or £5,000 on getting a professional team to edit it, proofread it, design it, and actually do a totally bespoke book. So you can do it on a budget, but you can also go full out and create an amazing product as well. So it really depends on what you really want, and also being able to manage that ROI. So one of my clients recently, I've had a couple of clients come back to me in the last few weeks actually to tell me how soon they've recouped their investment. And actually it only needs one really good corporate gig or one really good client, doesn't it, to actually recoup the investment in the whole project. If you are totally aligned to it, or maybe a few, depends on your niche and your area of expertise. So it's actually looking at, if you're trying to recoup your investment through book sales, it ain't going to happen. But if you're looking at how you can recoup your investment through the credibility, the recognition, and the respect that comes off the back
and the inroads that book could give you as well, because sometimes, like you say, if you want to get into corporate, or you want to access an area that you previously haven't, it's a really nice thing to say, can I send you a copy of my book? And take a look. So it's a really, really good calling card. But it's also nice to hear that there is a different, there's a wide range of possibilities. Okay, so it's not just for like, when you're really successful, then you can write a book when you can afford it. But actually, no, do you know what? You could do something now. You could do, a smaller version, a little bit. You could even do an ebook. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be in print. There's lots of things. So I don't, want people to think that they can't do it because of the position they're in, or maybe they're a new coach and they're like, God, I've just spent like $5,000 on my coaching, I can buy a book straight away. There's lots and lots of things that you can do. It's all about packaging up that information, isn't it, and getting it out there. So it sounds exciting, and I know that you operate very ethically, full of integrity, lots of experience to offer, which is great. And you're speaking about this again, aren't you, on Friday?
I am indeed. I am
at the networking meeting, although you've only got 10 minutes then, so this is the long version. So if you've listened to this, then you're lucky.
I may go off on a different tangent on Friday. Who knows what might come out.
Keep us in suspense. So how can people get in touch with you, Karen, if they would like to know more, would like to talk to you about how they could start their book?
Yeah,
We've got a link, haven't
I'm
we,
all
that we
over
can put in?
social media. You can pop the link
Yes.
in the show notes. If you go to librotas.com, which is librotas.com, you know, there's loads of freebies on my website. You can find out a bit about me. You know, there's all sorts of great stuff. Teresa, you're going to put the masterclass link. There's a brilliant masterclass that talks about probably what I'm going to talk a bit more about on Friday, which is how you can self-fund your book. So I'm going to save that little nugget for another day. But if you want to find out more, do go and watch the masterclass.
I'll put all the links into the show notes, so be sure to follow those. And if you've got any kind of vibe that you want to write a book, I really would recommend working with Karen, because Karen and I have known each other for quite a long time now. And you know, you're very consistent, you're very methodical, you obviously care about your clients a lot, and I think that's obviously why you're part of Coach Connects. We sort of share those similar values, so I'd have no hesitation in recommending you. So thank you, Karen. Thank you for sharing your nuggets and your wisdom. And I hope that's given people listening a bit of a framework, really, of like, actually, I can see the picture of how I could write this book. You know, maybe I've even got some ideas and it's not feeling so overwhelming now. So now you have a nice direction and someone to help you with it. So thanks for all of that and unpacking that. If you're interested in coming along to one of the Coach Connect networking meetings, they're for coaching industry specifically. They are once a month on a Friday, normally the third Friday of every month. So this podcast might not be out in time for Friday, so the next one will be 21st of October. So you can find your way to signing up for a free meeting on www.coach-magazine.com, or you can just find me, Teresa Brooks, on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I have a coach community as well, which you can come over and join on Facebook. So thanks, Karen. It's good to talk to you, and I'll look forward to seeing you again on Friday for a little bit more of the same.